In the quiet moments between meetings, during those long drives home, or perhaps in the stillness of early morning, most men experience a profound yearning that they rarely articulate. This yearning isn't for wealth, status, or even physical connection, though these are often mistaken as the primary drives. According to Jung, what men truly crave is meaning through heroic purpose. The American landscape has long celebrated external achievements. From the rugged frontiersman to the corporate executive, our cultural mythology reinforces the idea that a man's worth is measured by what he conquers. But Jung observed something deeper, operating beneath these cultural expectations, an archetypal need that transcends time and place. The need for heroic self-definition, Jung wrote, is no mere vanity, but the very core of masculine psychology. This isn't about puffing up one's chest or dominating others. Rather, it's about answering an internal call that demands we become more than what we currently are. Consider Mike, a software engineer from Portland who, by conventional standards, had made it. Six-figure salary, respected position, comfortable life, yet he described feeling hollow despite his achievements. "I couldn't shake this feeling that I was playing someone else's game," he shared. Success without meaning felt worse than failure. What Mike was experiencing wasn't unique. It was his unconscious mind signaling the absence of heroic purpose, that innate drive to overcome meaningful challenges that contribute to something greater than oneself. Why do so many women miss this fundamental aspect of masculine psychology? The disconnect often stems from a difference in psychological orientation. While feminine consciousness frequently finds fulfillment in connection and relationship, though certainly not exclusively, masculine consciousness often seeks meaning through overcoming obstacles in pursuit of purpose. This isn't to suggest a rigid binary. These psychological patterns exist on a spectrum across all genders. But understanding this difference can illuminate many relationship dynamics that otherwise remain puzzling. When a man withdraws emotionally or seems restless despite life's comforts, he may be experiencing what Jung called soul loss, a disconnection from his deeper purpose. The modern world offers countless distractions from this uncomfortable reality: endless entertainment, career advancement, material acquisition. Yet these temporary fixes often leave the underlying yearning unaddressed. What is your relationship with purpose? Do you recognize this yearning in yourself or in the men in your life? The path to psychological wholeness begins with acknowledging these deeper currents of the psyche. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, suggests that embracing rather than suppressing this heroic impulse is essential for psychological health. Not in service of ego, but in service of the self, the integrated whole of conscious and unconscious elements that constitutes our complete being. Modern man, Jung observed, does not understand how much his rationalism has put him at the mercy of the psychic underworld. The rational mind may dismiss the need for heroic purpose as primitive or unnecessary, but the unconscious mind continues to demand it nonetheless. This yearning manifests in countless ways, from the midlife crisis to the persistent feeling that there must be more to life than this. Recognizing this pattern doesn't confine us to stereotypical expressions of masculinity. Rather, it invites us to integrate this energy consciously, directing it toward authentic contribution rather than destructive outlets. What happens when a man's yearning for heroic purpose goes unacknowledged? Jung would suggest that it doesn't simply disappear, it descends into the shadow, that repository of denied aspects of ourselves that continues to influence our behavior from below the threshold of consciousness. In American society, where pragmatism and productivity are highly valued, the spiritual dimension of purpose is often dismissed as impractical or indulgent. Men are expected to find satisfaction in providing, protecting, and performing, all valuable contributions certainly, but potentially hollow when disconnected from deeper meaning. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, Jung wrote. Consider how this applies to the frustrated man who cannot name what he lacks. His irritability, his restlessness, his seemingly irrational dissatisfaction, these are not character flaws but signals from the unconscious that something essential is missing. Take the case of James, a successful attorney in Chicago. By his mid-40s, he had achieved partnership, financial security, and the respect of his peers. He had also developed a short temper, insomnia, and a growing sense of emptiness that he couldn't explain to his increasingly concerned wife. I found myself getting irrationally angry about small things, James recalled. My wife would ask what was wrong, and I honestly didn't know. I just felt compressed somehow, like I was living in too small a space. What James was experiencing was the shadow side of unfulfilled purpose. When the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge this yearning, it doesn't vanish, it transforms. It becomes projected onto others, sublimated into addictive behaviors, or expressed as vague dissatisfaction that permeates all aspects of life. In Jungian terms, this represents a classic example of what happens when we fail to integrate crucial aspects of our psychological makeup. The energy doesn't disappear, it simply finds less constructive outlets. Women partners often find themselves confused by this dynamic. From their perspective, they see a man who has everything, yet remains unsatisfied. This can trigger frustration. What more could you possibly want? Or concern, is there something wrong with our relationship? The miscommunication occurs because both parties are speaking different psychological languages. The journey toward integration begins with bringing this shadow material into consciousness. For James, this process began when a colleague recommended her community restoration project in an underserved neighborhood. Something clicked when I started working with my hands, seeing tangible results, knowing I was contributing to something larger than myself, he explained. It wasn't about recognition or achievement in the conventional sense, it was about meaning. This transformation illustrates what Jung called shadow work, the process of acknowledging and integrating disowned aspects of ourselves. The heroic impulse, when denied expression in meaningful ways, doesn't disappear. It festers or finds distorted expression. Modern American society offers few legitimate channels for this energy. Team sports provide a temporary outlet, as do competitive business environments, but these often lack the depth of purpose that the soul requires. The result is a culture of men who may achieve great success while feeling profoundly alienated from themselves. The statistics tell a troubling story. Men are more likely to commit suicide, struggle with substance abuse, and report feelings of isolation. While many factors contribute to these trends, the psychological disconnection from meaningful purpose plays a significant role. Women who understand this dynamic gain valuable insight into the masculine psyche. This isn't about excusing destructive behavior or suggesting that women bear responsibility for men's psychological integration. Rather, it's about fostering mutual understanding of different psychological orientations. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances, Jung observed. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When partners understand each other's deeper psychological needs, transformation becomes possible for both. What does healthy integration of this heroic impulse look like? It varies widely among individuals. For some, it manifests in creative endeavors, building, crafting, or artistic expression. For others, it emerges through mentorship, community leadership, or environmental stewardship. The common thread is contribution to something that transcends the individual ego. The journey toward integration involves several key steps. First, acknowledging the yearning rather than dismissing it as immaturity or restlessness. Second, examining where this energy currently finds expression, productive or otherwise. Third, experimenting with channels that might provide authentic fulfillment. This process relates directly to Jung's concept of individuation, becoming who we truly are by integrating all aspects of our psyche, both light and shadow. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, Jung wrote, but by integration of the contraries. For many men, this integration represents the central psychological task of midlife. The first half of life may be appropriately focused on establishing oneself in the world, career, family, social standing. But the second half demands a turning inward, an examination of what truly matters beyond social expectations and external achievements. How might our relationships, workplaces, and communities transform if we created more space for this deeper understanding of purpose? What possibilities might emerge if we acknowledge that material success, while valuable, cannot satisfy the soul's longing for meaning? These questions invite us to look beyond simplistic understandings of gender differences toward a more nuanced appreciation of human psychology in all its complexity. The journey toward psychological wholeness, what Jung called individuation, is not a straight line but a spiral. returning us to familiar terrain at deeper levels of understanding. This final chapter explores how men can consciously integrate their yearning for heroic purpose, how relationships can flourish when both partners understand these psychological dynamics, and how this integration contributes to collective well-being. Into the American context, where pragmatism often trumps introspection, the inner journey can seem indulgent or unnecessary. Our culture celebrates tangible achievements while remaining suspicious of psychological exploration. Yet Jung observed that your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. This awakening begins with recognizing the archetypal patterns that shape our psychology. The hero archetype, that internal pattern calling us toward meaningful challenge and growth, exists within the collective unconscious, that reservoir of shared human experience that transcends cultural boundaries. While its expression may be culturally influenced, its essential nature remains consistent across time and place. Consider David, a mid-career executive in Seattle who found himself increasingly disconnected from his work despite continued success. I kept getting promotions and raises, he recalled, but each achievement felt less satisfying than the last. I started wondering if there was something wrong with me for not being happier. David's experience reflects what Jung would identify as the call toward deeper authenticity, a summons from the self, Jung's term for the totality of the psyche, to move beyond ego-driven achievements toward more meaningful contribution. This call often intensifies in midlife, creating what many experience as a crisis, but what Jung recognized as an opportunity for profound transformation. The process of responding to this call involves several distinct phases that align with the hero's journey found in mythologies worldwide, a pattern Jung noted in his extensive cross-cultural studies. First comes the call itself, often experienced as dissatisfaction, restlessness, or a vague sense that something essential is missing. Many men initially resist this call, doubling down on external achievements or numbing the discomfort through various distractions, yet the call persists, growing louder until it cannot be ignored. Next comes what mythologist Joseph Campbell, building on Jung's work, called crossing the threshold, the decision to engage seriously with this inner prompting rather than continuing to evade it. This crossing often requires leaving familiar territory, whether literally through changing circumstances or figuratively through questioning long-held assumptions about what constitutes a successful life. For David, this threshold crossing came through a sabbatical, where he disconnected from his professional identity and allowed himself to explore long-dormant interests. I started volunteering at a youth mentorship program, something I'd always been curious about but never made time for, he explained. Working with these kids who faced real challenges completely shifted my perspective on what matters. This leads to the third phase, encountering the shadow. As men begin to pursue more authentic expressions of purpose, they inevitably confront disowned aspects of themselves, insecurities, fears, and unacknowledged needs that have been suppressed in service of maintaining a particular self-image or meeting external expectations. I realized how much of my identity was wrapped up in achievement and recognition, David shared. When I started mentoring, I had to confront how uncomfortable I felt not being the expert, not having all the answers. It was humbling and, honestly, pretty painful at first. This shadow confrontation represents crucial psychological work. Jung emphasized that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. By acknowledging these disowned aspects of ourselves, we begin to integrate them, reducing their power to control us from the unconscious. The fourth phase involves finding authentic expression for the heroic impulse, channels that provide genuine fulfillment rather than temporary distraction. This rarely involves grandiose achievements or public recognition. More often, it emerges through contribution that aligns with one's deepest values and natural gifts. For some men, this might mean shifting career paths entirely. For others, it involves finding meaning alongside existing commitments. The essential quality isn't what is done, but how it connects to one's sense of purpose and contribution. Throughout this journey, dreams play a significant role as messengers from the unconscious. Jung considered dreams the royal road to the unconscious, providing symbolic guidance when the conscious mind reaches its limits. Men engaged in this process often report dreams that reflect their inner transformation, dreams of death and rebirth, of discovering new rooms in familiar houses, of encountering wise figures who offer guidance. One of David's recurring dreams involved climbing a mountain, reaching what he thought was the summit, only to discover higher peaks beyond. I'd feel disappointed in the dream, but when I woke up I realized it was showing me something important, that growth doesn't have an end point. There's always further to go, more to discover. This continuous unfolding reflects Jung's understanding of individuation as a lifelong process rather than a destination. The privilege of a lifetime, Jung wrote, is to become who you truly are. This becoming never reaches completion, but continues to reveal new dimensions of possibility throughout life. How does this psychological journey affect relationships? When men undertake this work consciously, their connections with others, particularly intimate partners, often transform in parallel. Many women report that their male partners become more emotionally available, more authentic in their communications, and more present in the relationship as they integrate their deeper purpose. Rather than seeking fulfillment exclusively through the relationship, an impossible burden for any partner to bear, men engaged in this work bring a greater sense of wholeness to their connections. Sarah, David's wife of 15 years, noticed significant shifts as he embraced this inner work. He's more at peace with himself, she observed, less defensive when we disagree, more willing to be vulnerable. It's like he's no longer trying to prove anything, to me or to himself. This transformation reflects what Jung called holding, the tension of opposites, developing the capacity to integrate seemingly contradictory aspects of oneself rather than identifying exclusively with one side of any polarity. The man engaged in this work learns to be both strong and vulnerable, both autonomous and connected, both structured and spontaneous, as different situations require. For women seeking to understand this process in the men in their lives, patience and curiosity serve as valuable allies. This journey cannot be forced or rushed. Each person must find their own way toward greater wholeness, following the unique pattern of their individual psyche. However, understanding this process can foster compassion during challenging phases. When a man seems withdrawn or uncertain, it may reflect not a rejection of connection, but an inward turn necessary for his psychological development. Creating space for this introspection, while maintaining appropriate boundaries, can ultimately strengthen relationship bonds. The collective implications of this individual work extend far beyond personal relationships. Jung understood that societal transformation begins with individual consciousness. The world hangs on a thin thread, he observed, and that thread is the psyche of man. As more men integrate their heroic purpose consciously, channeling this energy toward meaningful contribution rather than domination or acquisition, our collective institutions begin to shift accordingly. Workplaces become more humane, communities more collaborative, and governance more focused on long-term well-being rather than short-term gain. Consider how this integration manifests in leadership styles. Leaders who have done this inner work tend to embody what contemporary management theorists call servant leadership, approaching their role as stewardship rather than an opportunity for personal advancement or power accumulation. These leaders, having confronted their own shadows, are less likely to project their unacknowledged issues onto others or use their position to compensate for inner insecurities. They can make difficult decisions without being driven by ego, listen to dissenting perspectives without becoming defensive, and prioritize collective flourishing over personal recognition. The business landscape is slowly beginning to recognize this shift. Companies increasingly seek leaders who demonstrate emotional intelligence, ethical clarity, and purpose beyond profit, all qualities that emerge naturally from the individuation process Jung described. Education represents another arena where this understanding can create meaningful change. Our current educational approaches often focus exclusively on external achievements while neglecting inner development. Imagine schools that balanced academic learning with age-appropriate opportunities for self-discovery, creative expression, and exploring questions of meaning and purpose. Such approaches wouldn't replace rigorous academic standards, but would complement them, recognizing that human development involves multiple dimensions. The result would be young people, particularly young men, who enter adulthood with greater self-awareness and clearer connection to their authentic purpose. The environmental crisis provides perhaps the most compelling collective application of this psychological understanding. Our exploitation of natural resources often stems from an unconscious attempt to fill inner emptiness through consumption and acquisition, a distortion of the heroic impulse. As men integrate this energy more consciously, many discover a deep connection to environmental stewardship. Rather than conquering nature, they find purpose in protecting and restoring ecological systems. This shift represents the mature masculine energy that Jung described, directed toward preservation rather than domination, sustainability rather than extraction. Throughout history, indigenous cultures have maintained initiation practices that guide young men through this psychological territory, providing structured containers for discovering authentic purpose within community context. Modern American society largely lacks these rituals, leaving many men to navigate this territory without maps or guides. Creating contemporary versions of these initiatory experiences, adapted to our current cultural context, represents one of the most important challenges for communities concerned with psychological well-being. Men's groups, mentorship programs, and structured retreat experiences can provide supportive environments for this essential inner work. For the individual, man reading or hearing these words, the path forward begins with honest self-reflection. What gives your life meaning beyond social expectations? Where do you feel most aligned with your authentic purpose? What aspects of yourself have you disowned or neglected that might be seeking integration? Dreams, journaling, time in nature, creative expression, and conversation with trusted friends can all serve as entryways to this exploration. Professional support from therapists or coaches trained in depth psychology can provide additional guidance, particularly when confronting challenging shadow material. The rewards of this journey extend far beyond resolving the restlessness or dissatisfaction that might initially prompt it. Men who undertake this work often report a profound sense of homecoming, of finally inhabiting their lives fully, rather than performing a role or meeting external expectations. There's a different quality to my experience now, David reflected 3 years into his journey. I still have difficult days and challenges like anyone else, but there's an underlying sense of rightness, like I'm aligned with something larger than myself, that makes even the hard parts meaningful. This sense of alignment, of contributing to something that transcends individual ego while expressing one's unique gifts, represents the mature integration of the heroic impulse. Not heroism as portrayed in action movies or corporate mythologies, but the quiet heroism of becoming fully human with all the vulnerability and authenticity that entails. Jung understood that this journey is fundamentally spiritual, though not necessarily religious in the conventional sense. It connects us to the deepest mystery of existence, the unfolding of consciousness through human experience. The privilege of a lifetime, Jung wrote, is to become who you truly are. This becoming represents our most profound responsibility to ourselves, to our relationships, and to the collective future of our troubled but beautiful world.